I hated my sister for 23 years before I learned the truth. That is not an exaggeration or a figure of speech. I mean it literally, precisely, with the kind of cold clarity that comes from spending more than 2 decades cataloging every slight, every injury, every moment of favoritism that proved what I had always known to be true. Anna was the chosen one, and I was the leftover. She was the sun around which our family revolved, and I was a distant, unimportant planet, barely visible, easily forgotten. I measured my life in the shadow she cast, and that shadow was long and dark and all-consuming. I hated her when we were children fighting over toys and attention. I hated her when we were teenagers navigating the brutal social hierarchies of high school. I hated her when we were adults, supposedly mature and evolved, but still trapped in the same old patterns of jealousy and resentment. And then, in the space of a single afternoon, in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and desperation, I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my sister, everything I had built my entire identity around, was a lie. Her name was Anna, and she was 3 years older than me. From my earliest memories, which were fragmented and unreliable but consistent in their emotional truth, she was the favored child, the golden one, the daughter who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unfair, as if the universe had decided to concentrate all the best genetic material in one person and leave the scraps for me. She had our mother's dark hair, thick and lustrous, the kind of hair that looked effortlessly perfect no matter what she did with it. She had our father's piercing blue eyes, the kind of eyes that made strangers stop and stare when we walked down the street together, the kind of eyes that seemed to see right through you and into whatever lay beyond. She was tall and graceful, with the kind of natural poise that other girls spent years trying to cultivate and never quite achieved. I, on the other hand, was average in every way. Average height, average build, average face, the kind of person who blends into crowds and is forgotten 5 minutes after leaving a room. When we stood side by side, which I tried to avoid whenever possible, the contrast was so stark it was almost comical. She was the swan, and I was the ugly duckling. Except in our family's version of the story, the ugly duckling never transformed into anything beautiful. The ugly duckling just stayed ugly, and everyone learned to look away. She was brilliant academically, the kind of student who earned straight A's without appearing to try, who won science fairs and spelling bees and academic competitions with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. Our parents' refrigerator was covered with her report cards, her certificates, her awards, a shrine to her excellence that I had to walk past every single day of my childhood. She was talented musically, playing the piano with a skill that our mother described as a gift from God, filling our house with the sound of Chopin and Debussy and Beethoven while I sat in my room with the door firmly closed, trying to drown out the noise of her perfection with the angry music I preferred, the kind with distorted guitars and screaming vocals that matched the chaos I felt inside. She was charming and sociable, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave an hour later with a dozen new friends. At family gatherings, she was the center of attention, telling stories and making jokes and accepting compliments with a gracious humility that only made people admire her more. And I was the other one, the disappointment, the son who never quite measured up, who struggled in school, who preferred taking apart old radios and building things with his hands to sitting still and memorizing facts from textbooks. My grades were mediocre at best, a string of C's and the occasional B that my father would examine with a frown, turning the report card over in his hands as if looking for something that wasn't there. Then he would set it aside without comment, and the silence was worse than any criticism could have been. The dynamic between Anna and me was established early and, I believed, permanently. She was the star, and I was the shadow. She was the one our parents bragged about at dinner parties, her name always preceded by superlatives. Our brilliant daughter, our talented daughter, our beautiful daughter. I was the one who got lectures about trying harder, applying myself, living up to my potential. I was the one who was told, again and again, in words both explicit and implicit, to be more like my sister. as if I could somehow transform myself into her through sheer force of will. As if my very existence as a separate, different person was a disappointment that needed to be corrected. It wasn't Anna's fault, not really. I understood that now, looking back with the clarity of adulthood and the wisdom that came from having my entire worldview shattered. She didn't ask to be the favorite. She didn't create the family dynamic that pitted us against each other like gladiators in an arena, competing for a prize that only one of us could win. She didn't wake up every morning and think of new ways to make me feel inadequate, but understanding that intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two very different things. And for 23 years, my emotions had been in complete control. I hated the way she looked at me with that expression of patient, condescending kindness, as if I were a wounded animal she was trying to coax out of hiding. She would knock on my bedroom door, her voice soft and gentle, asking if I wanted to talk, if I wanted to play a game, if I wanted her help with my homework. And I would tell her to go away, my voice sharp and hostile, and she would retreat with a sad smile that only made me hate her more. I hated the way she offered to tutor me in subjects I was struggling with, her explanations patient and clear, as if I were too stupid to understand things on my own. I hated the way she defended me when our parents criticized my grades, saying things like, "Marcus is trying his best," or "Marcus just learns differently," as if she needed to protect me from the consequences of my own failures. I hated the way our parents' faces lit up when she entered a room, a transformation so complete and so obvious that it felt like a physical blow every time I witnessed it. Their eyes would brighten, their postures would relax, their voices would warm. And when I entered a room, nothing changed. I was just there, part of the background, easily overlooked. And most of all, I hated the way she seemed to accept her role as the superior one without ever questioning it. She never once, in all those years, said to our parents, "This isn't fair. You shouldn't compare Marcus to me. You shouldn't make him feel like he's less than." She never once acknowledged the fundamental injustice of our situation. She just sailed through life on a cloud of praise and approval, and I trailed behind her, choking on her dust. As we grew older, the gap between us widened into a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Anna was accepted to an Ivy League university, a full scholarship that our parents talked about for months, telling everyone they knew about their brilliant daughter and her amazing opportunities. The neighbors, the extended family, the cashiers at the grocery store, no one was safe from the relentless boasting. I graduated from high school by the skin of my teeth, my GPA barely high enough to qualify for a diploma, and enrolled at the local community college more because I didn't know what else to do than because I had any real interest in further education. My parents attended Anna's high school graduation with flowers and cameras and tears of pride. They attended mine with polite applause and a card that said "Congratulations" on the outside and nothing on the inside. Anna went on to law school after college, another achievement, another line on the ever-growing list of her accomplishments. She graduated near the top of her class, passed the bar exam on her first attempt, and was recruited by one of the most prestigious firms in the city. She married a man named David, a fellow lawyer who was just as perfect as she was, handsome and successful and universally admired. They bought a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, the kind of house that looked like it belonged in a magazine, with a manicured lawn and a gourmet kitchen and a nursery that was already prepared for the children they were planning to have. She built a life that looked like something out of a dream, the kind of life that other people looked at with envy and admiration. I dropped out of community college after 2 semesters, unable to keep up with the coursework, unable to justify the cost, unable to see the point of continuing to fail at something I had never wanted in the first place. I bounced between a series of dead-end jobs, working in warehouses and fast food restaurants and retail stores, each one slightly worse than the last. I eventually found work as a mechanic at an auto shop on the edge of town, a grimy, greasy place that smelled of oil and gasoline and the sweat of hard labor. It was honest work, work I was genuinely good at, work that made sense to my hands in a way that textbooks and lectures had never made sense to my brain. But I knew my parents saw it as another failure, another disappointment, another confirmation that I would never measure up to my sister. The resentment festered inside me like an untreated wound. It became a part of my identity, woven into the fabric of who I was so tightly that I couldn't imagine myself without it. I was the angry one. I was the bitter one. I was the son who had been given nothing and expected everything. I avoided family gatherings whenever possible, making excuses about work or other commitments, inventing obligations that didn't exist. When I did attend, usually because my mother had called me in tears and begged me to come, I sat in the corner with my arms crossed and my expression sullen, nursing a beer and watching Anna hold court. She would be surrounded by relatives, charming everyone with her stories and her laugh and her effortless grace, and I would be alone, invisible, forgotten. My parents treated me with a kind of cautious wariness, as if I were a bomb that might go off at any moment, as if they were afraid to say the wrong thing and trigger an explosion. Anna tried to reach out to me, to bridge the gap between us, but I rebuffed every attempt with cold indifference or outright hostility. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want her kindness. I wanted her to acknowledge, just once, that the game had been rigged from the start. The breaking point came when I was 28 years old. I had been saving money for years, working overtime at the auto shop, taking on side jobs repairing cars in my neighbors' driveways, squirreling away every spare dollar in a savings account that grew with agonizing slowness. I had a dream, the only dream I had ever really had, the one thing that had kept me going through all the years of disappointment and failure. I wanted to open my own garage, my own business, a place where I could be my own boss, where I could build something with my own two hands, where I could finally prove to the world and to myself that I wasn't the worthless failure my family believed me to be. I had found the perfect location, a rundown building on the edge of town that had once been a gas station. It was ugly and neglected, with peeling paint and a cracked concrete floor and a roof that leaked in at least 3 places. But I could see the potential beneath the decay. I could see what it could become with enough work and enough love. I had a business plan, meticulously researched and carefully written, with projections and estimates and contingency plans for every possible scenario. I had a list of potential clients, people I had met through my work at the auto shop who had told me they would follow me if I ever struck out on my own. I had a vision for what my life could be if I could just catch a break, if the universe would just once, decide to be on my side. But I needed a loan to make it happen. The building cost money, and the equipment cost money, and the renovations cost money, and all of it added up to a sum that was far beyond what I had managed to save. I went to bank after bank, dressed in the only suit I owned, my hands scrubbed clean of grease for the first time in years, and I made my pitch to loan officer after loan officer. And bank after bank turned me down. My credit score was too low. My income history was too unstable. I didn't have enough collateral. I was, in their eyes, exactly what I had always been. Not good enough. Not reliable enough. Not worth the risk. In desperation, I went to my parents. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, swallowing my pride and going to the people who had spent my entire life telling me I was a disappointment. I sat in their living room, the same living room where I had received so many lectures about trying harder and applying myself, and I laid out my plan. I showed them the business proposal. I showed them the estimates and the projections. I showed them the list of clients who had promised to follow me. I asked them, begged them, to believe in me just this once, to help me, to give me the chance I had never been given. They listened in silence, their faces unreadable. My mother kept glancing at my father, as if looking for guidance on how to respond. My father kept his eyes fixed on the papers I had spread out on the coffee table, his expression grim and thoughtful. When I finished speaking, the silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. Then my father cleared his throat, a sound I had heard 1,000 times before, a sound that always preceded bad news. "We'd like to help you, Marcus," he said, his voice slow and careful, each word chosen with deliberation. "We really would. You have to believe that. But we just don't have the money right now. Things have been tight. We've been helping Anna with some expenses, and our resources are stretched thin. I'm sorry. Helping Anna with some expenses. Of course. It always came back to Anna. She needed help with a down payment on a bigger house, the house I had seen pictures of on social media, The house with the gourmet kitchen and the manicured lawn and the nursery waiting for children. She needed help with the costs of her wedding, the lavish affair that had been held at a country club and had probably cost more than I earned in a year. She needed help with her law school loans, even though she was earning a six-figure salary at her prestigious firm. She needed. And whatever she needed, she got. While I, the son who had never asked for anything, who had worked himself to exhaustion and saved every penny and tried to build something on his own, was told there was nothing left for me. The scraps had all been given to her, and I was left with nothing but the bones. I walked out of my parents' house without saying another word. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just stood up, gathered my papers, and walked out the front door. I didn't speak to any of them for 6 months. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't respond to their text messages. I deleted their voicemails without listening to them. I built a wall around myself, brick by brick, and I retreated behind it, nursing my anger like a wound that refused to heal. My dream of opening my own garage died slowly, painfully, its death throes stretching out over weeks and months. I watched the building I had wanted to buy get sold to someone else, someone who turned it into a convenience store that went out of business within a year. I watched my plans and my projections and my client list gather dust in a drawer. I watched my future, the future I had worked so hard to build, crumble into nothing. And I blamed Anna for all of it. I blamed her with the pure, righteous fury of someone who had been wronged and had no other outlet for his pain. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late October, 6 months after I had walked out of my parents' house, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize, an area code from the city where Anna lived. I almost didn't answer. I was at work, my hands covered in grease, the hood of a customer's car propped open in front of me. But something made me pick up the phone. Some instinct I couldn't explain and didn't try to. Marcus? The voice was female, unfamiliar, professional but tinged with an undercurrent of urgency that immediately put me on edge. Is this Marcus Donovan? This is Marcus, I said warily, wiping my hands on a rag. Who is this, and what do you want? My name is Dr. Patel. I'm a physician at Mercy General Hospital in the city. I'm calling about your sister, Anna Donovan. She's been in a serious accident. A car accident. She's in critical condition in our intensive care unit. She's been asking for you. She said it was urgent. She said she needed to speak with you before her condition changes. The world seemed to tilt around me, the familiar surroundings of the auto shop suddenly strange and unreal. I gripped the edge of the workbench, my knuckles white, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Is she going to be okay? What happened? How bad is it? There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that tells you everything you don't want to know before the words are even spoken. She's very seriously injured, Mr. Donovan. The accident caused significant internal trauma, and she's already undergone one surgery. The doctors are doing everything they can, but the next 24 to 48 hours are critical. If you want to see her, I would strongly recommend you come as soon as possible. She's been drifting in and out of consciousness, and every time she wakes up, she asks for you. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. My sister, the golden child, the perfect one, the woman who had everything I had ever wanted, was lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying. And she was asking for me, the brother who had hated her for 23 years, the brother who had refused to speak to her for 6 months, the brother who had blamed her for every disappointment and every failure and every moment of unhappiness in his life. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why does she want to see me? We're not exactly close. We haven't spoken in months. She should be asking for her husband, for our parents, for anyone but me. I don't know the answer to that, Dr. Patel said, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost like compassion. But she's been very insistent. She made me promise I would get you here. She said there was something she needed to tell you, something she should have told you a long time ago. She said it was the most important thing in the world, and she couldn't leave without saying it. The most important thing in the world. What could possibly be that important? What could she possibly have to say to me after 23 years of silence and 6 months of estrangement? Part of me wanted to refuse. Part of me wanted to hang up the phone and go back to work and pretend this call had never happened. Part of me wanted to continue hating her from a distance, safe behind the walls I had built. But another part of me, a part one had been suppressing for as long as I could remember, wanted to see her. Wanted to know what was so urgent. Wanted, perhaps, to say goodbye. Fine, I said, the word coming out before I could stop it. I'll come. I'll leave now. Tell her I'm on my way. The drive to Mercy General took 2 hours. 2 hours of rain hammering against the windshield and wind buffeting the sides of my car, and the kind of gray, oppressive weather that seems tailor-made for tragedy. The highway was nearly empty, most drivers having decided to stay home rather than brave the storm, and I was alone with my thoughts and my memories and the complicated, tangled emotions that I had been avoiding for most of my adult life. I thought about Anna as a child, the way she used to read me bedtime stories when our parents were too busy, her voice soft and patient as she sounded out the difficult words. I thought about her as a teenager, the way she had defended me against a bully at school, standing up to a boy twice her size and threatening him with consequences if he ever laid a hand on me again. I thought about her as an adult, the way she had tried to reach out to me at family gatherings, her attempts at conversation met with my cold indifference, her offers of help rejected with hostility. And I thought about the 6 months of silence, the calls I had ignored, the messages I had deleted, the wall I had built between us. I arrived at the hospital just as the rain was beginning to let up, the storm moving east and leaving behind a sky that was still gray and heavy with clouds. Mercy General was a sprawling complex of glass and steel, and the intensive care unit was on the 7th floor, a place of hushed voices and beeping monitors and the quiet, desperate hope of families waiting for news. The nurse at the station directed me to Anna's room, her expression carefully neutral, the expression of someone who had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything. When I walked into the room and saw my sister lying in that bed, all the anger, all the resentment, all the carefully cultivated hatred that I had been carrying for 23 years drained out of me in an instant. It didn't fade gradually. It didn't diminish slowly. It just vanished, replaced by something I didn't have a name for. Something that felt almost like grief, but deeper, more primal. She was barely recognizable. Her beautiful face, the face that had launched 1,000 comparisons and 1,000 resentments, was bruised and swollen, one eye completely closed, her lips split and crusted with dried blood. There was a bandage wrapped around her head, covering part of her dark hair, the hair that was just like our mother's. Tubes and wires connected her to an array of machines that beeped and hummed and whirred, keeping track of her heart rate and her blood pressure and the fragile, flickering pulse of life that was still moving through her broken body. One of her arms was in a cast, suspended from a traction device above the bed. The other lay at her side, the hand limp and pale, and 4 lines taped to the back of it. Her breathing was shallow and labored, assisted by a machine that made a soft, rhythmic sighing sound with every breath. Marcus! Her voice was barely a whisper, so faint I had to lean close to hear it. Her eyes, or at least the one that wasn't swollen shut, fluttered open and focused on my face with obvious effort. You came. I wasn't sure you would. I thought you might still be too angry. I almost didn't, I admitted, my voice rough with emotions I didn't want to name. Even now, even with her lying broken in a hospital bed, I couldn't completely let go of the defenses I had spent a lifetime building. The doctor said you had something important to tell me. She said it couldn't wait. So here I am. Tell me what you need to tell me. She closed her eye for a moment, and I saw a tear escape from beneath the lid, tracing a slow path down her bruised cheek before disappearing into the bandage on her head. There's something I should have told you years ago, she said, her voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it over the hum of the machines. Something I've been carrying for a long time. Something that has been eating at me every single day. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed, because I was afraid, because I knew that if you ever found out the truth, you would hate me even more than you already did. And I couldn't bear that. Even with all the distance between us, even with all the anger and the silence, I couldn't bear the thought of you hating me completely. The truth about what? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended, old habits dying hard. What could you possibly have to tell me that would make any difference after 23 years? What secret could be so terrible that you've been carrying it for your entire life? She opened her eye and looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that I had never seen before. It wasn't pity, the condescending pity I had always imagined in her gaze. It wasn't superiority, the smug satisfaction of the favored child looking down at the disappointment. It was guilt. Deep, profound, soul-crushing guilt. The kind of guilt that leaves marks on a person, that changes the shape of who they are. The truth about why Mom and Dad always favored me, she said. The truth about why they never seemed to have anything left for you. The truth about why your life has been so much harder than mine. It wasn't because you were lazy. It wasn't because you were stupid. It wasn't because you didn't try hard enough. It was because of me. It was all because of me. I stared at her, my mind racing, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. What are you talking about? How could any of this be your fault? You were just a kid, same as me. You didn't ask for any of this. But I benefited from it, she said, and her voice cracked on the words. I benefited, and I never spoke up, and that silence has defined both of our lives. Do you remember when we were children, and Mom and Dad used to tell you that you needed to try harder in school? That you needed to apply yourself? That you were smart, but just not living up to your potential? I remembered. Of course I remembered. Those lectures had been the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on a constant loop in the background of every memory I had. They said it all the time. Every report card, every parent-teacher conference, every time I brought home a test with a low grade. They said I was lazy. They said I wasn't trying. They said I could do better if I just applied myself. They were wrong, Anna said, and her voice was fierce despite her weakness. They were completely, catastrophically wrong. You weren't lazy, Marcus. You were never lazy. You had a learning disability. Dyslexia. The doctors diagnosed it when you were in second grade. You were tested, extensively, by a specialist that the school brought in. The report was very clear. You needed special tutoring, special programs, special resources to help you learn the way other kids learned. Your brain was wired differently, and you needed different tools to succeed. But those resources cost money. A lot of money. Money our parents didn't have. The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced off the wall of assumptions I had built over 23 years and scattered like meaningless noise. That's not possible, I said, shaking my head. I was never diagnosed with anything. I was never tested for anything. The school never said anything about dyslexia. I was just not smart enough. That's what Dad always said. He said I took after his brother, the one who dropped out of school and never made anything of himself. Dad was wrong, Anna said, and there was a hardness in her voice now, an edge of anger that I had never heard before. Dad was wrong about so many things. The school did test you. The diagnosis was very clear, but the school district didn't have the resources to provide the kind of specialized tutoring you needed. They told Mom and Dad they would have to hire someone privately, an educational therapist who specialized in dyslexia. And that was expensive, thousands of dollars a year. Money our parents simply didn't have. I sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed, my legs no longer able to support me. My mind was reeling, struggling to integrate this new information with everything I had believed about myself for my entire life. If I was diagnosed, why didn't anyone ever tell me? Why did Mom and Dad let me believe I was just stupid? Because they were ashamed, Anna said, and the words came out in a rush now, as if she had been holding them back for so long that they couldn't be contained any longer. Ashamed that they couldn't afford to help you. Ashamed that they had to choose between their children. Ashamed that they made the choice they made. What choice? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, a labored, painful breath that made the machines beep faster for a moment. When I was 12 years old, I was accepted into a special music program, a prestigious academy in the city, one of the best in the country. The tuition was enormous, but the opportunities it offered were incredible. Master classes with world-renowned musicians, performance opportunities at major venues, a direct pipeline to the best conservatories and music schools in the country. It was everything I had ever wanted, and it cost almost exactly the same amount as the specialized tutoring you needed. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture that was so terrible, so devastating, that I could barely bring myself to look at it. They had to choose, I said slowly, the words feeling like broken glass in my mouth, between your music program and my education. And they chose you. Yes, Anna whispered, and the tears were flowing freely down her face now, soaking into the bandage on her head. They chose me. They chose my dream over your future. And I let them. I was 12 years old, and I wanted that music program so badly I couldn't see straight. I wanted it more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. And I knew what they were giving up to give it to me. I knew that you would suffer. I knew that you would struggle. I knew that your life would be harder because of the choice they were making. But I didn't say no. I didn't refuse. I didn't insist that you get the help you needed, even if it meant giving up my dream. I was selfish, Marcus. I was so selfish, and you have been paying the price ever since. I sat in stunned silence, the world rearranging itself around me. My struggles in school, my parents' constant disappointment, the way they had always treated Anna like a princess and me like an afterthought. It wasn't because she was inherently better than me. It wasn't because I was fundamentally flawed or somehow less deserving of love. It was because they had made a terrible choice, a choice they could never take back, and they had spent the rest of their lives trying to justify it to themselves. They couldn't admit that they had sacrificed one child's future for another's. So they had convinced themselves that I wouldn't have succeeded anyway, that I was lazy, unmotivated, incapable, that the tutoring wouldn't have helped, that my failures were my own fault, not theirs. And after they made that choice, Anna continued, her voice growing weaker with every word, they felt guilty. Horribly, overwhelmingly guilty. So they compensated. They poured all their attention and all their praise and all their resources into me, trying to convince themselves that they had made the right decision. If I turned out to be a success, then maybe their choice was justified. Maybe it was worth it. They had to believe that, Marcus. They had to believe it. Because the alternative was facing the truth that they had destroyed one child's life to elevate the other. And that truth was too painful for them to bear. But you knew, I said, my voice hollow. You knew the truth, and you never told me. You let me believe I was worthless. You let me struggle and fail and hate myself. For 23 years, you let me believe that I was the problem. I know, she said, and her voice was so full of pain that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I told myself I was protecting you. I told myself that knowing the truth would only make you feel worse. I told myself 100 different lies to justify my silence. But the real reason I never told you was because I was a coward. I was afraid of your anger, afraid of your hatred, afraid that if you knew what I had done, you would never speak to me again. And I was right, wasn't I? You did hate me. You did stop speaking to me. And it was exactly what I deserved. I sat in that chair for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. The machines beeped steadily, reassuringly, a reminder that despite everything, my sister was still alive, still here, still holding on. And I thought about all the years I had spent hating her, resenting her, blaming her for everything that had gone wrong in my life. I had been right to be angry, but I had been angry at the wrong person. I had been angry at Anna, when I should have been angry at our parents. I had been angry at the favored child, when I should have been angry at the system that had forced them to choose. Why are you telling me this now? I asked finally. After all these years, why now? Because I'm tired of carrying it, she said, and her voice was barely audible now, fading in and out like a radio station losing its signal. Because I've been carrying this guilt for 23 years, and it has poisoned everything. Every success I've had, every achievement, every moment of happiness, has been shadowed by the knowledge of what it cost you. I became a lawyer because I thought if I helped enough people, it might somehow balance the scales. I married David because he was kind and good, and I thought I deserved to be happy. But I was wrong. I don't deserve to be happy. Not after what I did to you. Don't say that, I said, and the words surprised me even as I spoke them. You were 12 years old. You were a child. You can't blame yourself for a choice our parents made. I can, she said. And I do. Every single day. She reached out with her uninjured hand, the one without the four, and grasped my fingers with a grip that was surprisingly strong. But that's not the only reason I asked you to come. There's something else. Something I need to give you. In my briefcase, in the closet over there, there's an envelope. Please, get it. I found her briefcase where she had indicated, a sleek leather bag that looked expensive and professional and completely out of place in the sterile hospital environment. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope with my name written on the front in her elegant handwriting. I brought it back to the bed and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a cashier's check, made out to me, for $250,000. And attached to it was a letter, several pages long, written in Anna's careful, precise script. Marcus, the letter began. If you're reading this, something has happened to me, and I wasn't able to tell you in person what I needed to say. This money is for your garage, for your dream. I know it doesn't make up for what I took from you. I know it doesn't give you back the years of struggle and frustration and pain. I know it doesn't erase the damage that was done. But it's what I can do, and I hope it helps. I've been saving this money for 15 years, ever since I started working as a lawyer. Every bonus, every extra paycheck, every dollar I could spare, I put it into this account. I told myself it was an emergency fund, but I always knew, deep down, that it was for you. It was always for you. I'm sorry I didn't give it to you sooner. I'm sorry I was too proud and too scared to tell you the truth. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better, Marcus. You deserved parents who supported you, a sister who protected you, a life that wasn't defined by struggle. I can't give you any of that, but I can give you this. Please use it to build the life you've always wanted. You've earned it. With all my love, your sister, Anna. I stared at the check, at the number written on it in neat, official type. $250,000. Enough to buy the building I had been dreaming about. Enough to renovate it, equip it, hire staff, build something real and lasting. Enough to change my life completely. And it had come from her. The sister I had hated for 23 years. The sister I had blamed for everything. The sister who had been saving this money, year after year, bonus after bonus, waiting for the right moment to give it to me. There's more, Anna said, her voice barely a whisper now, each word an obvious effort. Read the rest of the letter. There's more you need to know. I turned the page, and I read the words that would change everything. The money for the loan you asked Mom and Dad for, the one they refused you. They didn't refuse you because they were helping me. They refused you because they didn't have the money. They've been struggling financially for years. Dad's business never really recovered from the recession, and Mom's medical bills have been piling up. They've been too proud to admit it, to you or to anyone. And I've been helping them, paying their mortgage, covering their medical expenses, making sure they could stay in their house. They didn't choose me over you, Marcus. Not this time. They just didn't have anything left to give. And I've been trying to help them because they're our parents, and despite everything they did, despite the terrible choices they made, they're still our parents. I hope you can understand. I hope you can forgive them. I hope you can forgive me. I lowered the letter, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with tears I hadn't even realized I was shedding. The revelations were coming so fast now that I could barely process them. My parents, the people I had resented for so long, were not the wealthy, selfish figures I had imagined them to be. They were struggling, barely keeping their heads above water, too ashamed to admit the truth to their own son. And Anna, the sister I had hated with every fiber of my being, had been quietly, secretly, holding the entire family together. She had been paying our parents' mortgage, covering their medical bills, making sure they could stay in their home. And she had been saving money for me, for my dream, for the garage I had been forced to abandon. Why didn't they tell me? I asked, my voice cracking on every word. Why did they let me believe they were choosing you over me, again, just like they always had? Because they were ashamed, Anna said, her voice growing fainter with every passing minute. Ashamed of their financial problems. Ashamed of needing help from their daughter after everything they had done. Ashamed of failing you, over and over again, in ways that could never be undone. They didn't know how to face you, Marcus. They didn't know how to apologize for something that was too big for apologies. So they let you believe what you wanted to believe. They let you hate them because they thought they deserved it. And they let you hate me because I thought I deserved it too. I sat in the chair beside her bed, the letter in one hand and the check in the other, and I felt something inside me begin to shift. It wasn't a sudden transformation, not the kind of instant, dramatic change that happens in movies and books. It was slower than that, more gradual, more painful. The anger that had been my constant companion for 23 years was not going to disappear overnight. But it was beginning to crack, to crumble, to lose its hold on me. In its place, something else was growing. Something that felt almost like understanding, almost like compassion, almost like the first faint stirrings of forgiveness. I need to call Mom and Dad, I said, more to myself than to her. I need to talk to them. I need to make this right. There's time, Anna said, and for the first time since I had walked into her hospital room, a faint, fragile smile crossed her battered face. There's still time. That's the one thing we have left. Time to forgive. Time to heal. Time to be a family again. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I called my parents from the hospital waiting room, my voice shaking as I told them what had happened, what Anna had told me, what I had learned. My mother burst into tears on the phone, great heaving sobs that made it impossible to understand what she was saying. My father was quieter, more controlled, but I could hear the emotion in his voice, the years of guilt and shame and regret that he had been carrying alone. We wanted to tell you, he said, his voice rough and unsteady. Every single day, we wanted to tell you. But we didn't know how. We didn't know how to admit that we had failed you so completely. We thought it was better to let you hate us than to make you face the truth of what we had done. The truth is hard, I said. But the silence was harder. The silence made me believe I was worthless. The silence made me hate everyone, including myself. I needed the truth, Dad. I needed it 23 years ago. I know, he said, and now I could hear that he was crying too, the quiet, restrained crying of a man who had been taught his whole life that showing emotion was a sign of weakness. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Marcus, for everything. My parents came to the hospital that evening, driving through the last remnants of the storm to be with their daughter and their son. My mother looked older than I remembered, her face lined with worry and grief and the accumulated weight of decades of regret. My father looked smaller somehow, diminished, the confident, authoritative figure of my childhood replaced by a tired, frightened old man. When they walked into Anna's room and saw her lying in that bed, connected to all those machines, my mother let out a cry that was almost animal in its anguish. She rushed to Anna's side, taking her hand, kissing her forehead, whispering words I couldn't hear. My father hung back, his face pale, his eyes glistening, as if he were afraid to get too close to something so fragile. Anna was asleep when they arrived, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion of the ordeal. The doctors said her vital signs were stable, that she was responding well to treatment, that the surgery had been successful. But there were still risks. There were always risks. The next few days would determine whether she would make a full recovery or whether there would be permanent damage. We would have to wait and see. We took turns sitting with her, my mother and my father and I, rotating through the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting room, drinking terrible hospital coffee, and talking in the hushed, tentative voices of people who were just beginning to learn how to be a family. There were tears. There were recriminations. There were long, painful silences when no one knew what to say. But there was also something else, something I hadn't felt in this family for as long as I could remember. There was honesty. There was vulnerability. There was a willingness to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. My father told me about the day they had received my diagnosis, the day the specialist had explained that I had dyslexia and would need specialized tutoring to succeed in school. "We wanted to help you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We wanted to give you everything you needed, but we just couldn't afford it. We were barely making ends meet as it was." And then the music program called, the one Anna had been dreaming about, and they offered her a full scholarship, but it didn't cover everything. There were still costs, significant costs, and we had to choose. He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "We told ourselves we would find a way to help you later. We would save money, get a second job, something. But the years went by, and we never did. And by the time we realized how much you were struggling, it felt too late to do anything about it. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, the question that had been burning in my chest since the moment Anna had first spoken her confession. If I had known I had dyslexia, if I had known there was a reason I was struggling, maybe I could have found help on my own. Maybe I wouldn't have spent my whole life thinking I was just stupid. We were ashamed, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ashamed that we couldn't provide for both our children. Ashamed that we had to choose. And then, after we made the choice, we were ashamed of the choice itself. We couldn't admit what we had done, not to you, not to anyone. So we pretended everything was fine. We pretended you were just going through a phase, that you would grow out of it, that everything would work out in the end. And when it didn't, when you continued to struggle and continued to fail, we blamed you instead of ourselves. It was easier that way. Easier to believe that you were lazy than to face the truth of our own failure. I looked at my parents, these two people who had shaped my life in ways I was only beginning to understand, and I felt a strange, complicated mixture of emotions. There was still anger there, the old, familiar anger that had been my companion for so long. But there was also pity, and understanding, and the first faint stirrings of something that might, in time, become forgiveness. I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay, I said slowly, choosing my words with care. It's not. What you did, the choices you made, they hurt me in ways that I'm still trying to understand. I spent my whole life believing I was worthless, and that belief shaped everything about who I became. I can't just forget that. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. We don't expect you to forget. We don't expect you to forgive. We just want a chance to try to make things right. A chance to be better. A chance to be the parents you deserved all along. That's all I can ask for, I said. That's all any of us can ask for. A chance to be better. Anna woke up on the third day after the accident. I was sitting by her bed, reading a book I had found in the hospital gift shop, when I heard her voice, weak but clear, calling my name. Marcus, she said, her eye fluttering open. You're still here. I'm still here, I said, setting the book aside and leaning forward. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, she said, and a ghost of her old smile flickered across her face. Which I guess I did, in a manner of speaking. The doctors told me the surgery went well. They said I'm going to recover. You are, I confirmed. It's going to take time, and there's going to be physical therapy and probably some challenges along the way. But you're going to be okay. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze searching my face. And you? Are you okay? I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? I wasn't sure I knew what okay meant anymore. The life I had built, the identity I had constructed around my anger and my resentment, had been dismantled in the space of a few days. I was standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what came next. But for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something that wasn't anger. Something that felt almost like hope. I'm getting there, I said. I talked to Mom and Dad. We talked for a long time. About everything. About the diagnosis, about the choice they made, about the years of silence and shame. It wasn't easy. It's still not easy. But it's a start. Anna nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. And us? Are we going to be okay? I reached out and took her hand, the same hand I had held 3 days ago when I thought she might be dying. It was warmer now, stronger, more alive. I think we are, I said. It's going to take time. I can't just flip a switch and stop being angry after 23 years. But I want to try. I want to build something new, something better, something that isn't defined by the mistakes of the past. Me too, she said, and tears were glistening in her eye again. But this time, I thought they might be tears of relief. Me too, Marcus. More than anything. The weeks that followed were a slow, steady march toward recovery. Anna was discharged from the hospital after 10 days, and she went to stay with our parents while she recuperated. I visited as often as I could, driving the 2 hours from my apartment to their house, and we spent hours talking, really talking, in a way we had never talked before. We shared memories, both good and bad. We shared regrets. We shared hopes for the future. We were learning, slowly and painfully, how to be siblings again. I used the money from Anna's check to buy the building on the edge of town, the same building I had been dreaming about for years. The sale went through surprisingly quickly, and I threw myself into the renovation with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I worked 12-hour days, tearing down walls and replacing floors and installing equipment. I hired a couple of guys from the old auto shop to help me, and we built something together, something real and solid and lasting. When the garage finally opened, 6 months after Anna's accident, I named it Donovan Family Automotive, and I invited my entire family to the grand opening. My parents came, looking older but somehow lighter, as if the weight they had been carrying for so many years had finally been lifted. My mother hugged me tightly, her eyes wet with tears, and told me she was proud of me. My father shook my hand, and then pulled me into an embrace, the first real hug I could remember receiving from him since I was a child. "You did this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You built this. I'm so proud of you, son." And Anna came too, walking with a cane but standing tall, her face still bearing faint traces of the accident, but her eyes bright with happiness. She had recovered remarkably well, the doctors said. There would be some lingering effects, some weakness in her left side that might never fully go away. But she was alive. She was walking. She was here. "I have something for you," I said, handing her a small, wrapped package. "It's not much, just a little something to say thank you for everything." She unwrapped the package, her movements slow and careful, and when she saw what was inside, she gasped. It was a framed photograph, old and slightly faded, of the two of us as children. We were standing in front of our parents' house, our arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the unself-conscious joy of kids who hadn't yet learned how complicated the world could be. I had found it in a box of old photos while cleaning out my apartment, and I had framed it as a reminder of what we had been and what we could be again. "I remember this day," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was the summer before everything changed. Before the music program, before the diagnosis, before all of it. We were so happy. We were just kids." "We were," I said. "And we can't go back to that. We can't undo what happened. But we can go forward. Together. That's what family does. It forgives. It moves forward. It doesn't give up." Anna hugged me then. A real hug. The kind of hug we had never shared as adults. And I felt the last remnants of my anger dissolve completely. It was gone. The hatred, the resentment, the bitterness that had defined my life for so long. In its place was something I had never expected to feel. Gratitude. For the sister who had sacrificed her peace of mind for my future. For the parents who had made terrible choices but were trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. For the second chance we had all been given. The story of my family is not a simple one. It's not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, where all the wounds are healed and all the pain is forgotten. There are still moments of awkwardness, echoes of old arguments that resurface when we least expect them. There are still scars that ache when the weather turns cold, memories that sting when we stumble across them in unexpected places. But there is also love, the kind of love that comes from surviving something terrible together, the kind of love that is forged in the fire of shared suffering and emerges stronger than before. I hated my sister for 23 years before I learned the truth. And then, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, I learned to love her again. Not the idealized version of her I had resented for so long, but the real Anna. The flawed, complicated, deeply human Anna who had made mistakes and carried guilt and tried, in her own imperfect way, to make things right. She was not the villain of my story. She never had been. She was just a person, trying to navigate an impossible situation, trying to hold a broken family together with nothing but her own determination and love. And in the end, that love was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The grand opening of Donovan Family Automotive was a success beyond anything I had dared to hope. The local newspaper sent a reporter who wrote a flattering article about the new business and its owner. Customers came in a steady stream, old clients from my previous job, and new faces drawn by word of mouth and the positive reviews that began appearing online. Within a year, I had to hire 2 more mechanics just to keep up with the demand. Within 2 years, I was able to pay Anna back the money she had given me, though she tried repeatedly to refuse. I insisted. It was important to me, a symbol of my independence, a proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. She finally accepted, and then immediately turned around and donated the entire amount to a charity that provided tutoring for children with learning disabilities. That was so perfectly Anna that I couldn't even be surprised. My parents continued to heal, slowly but steadily. My father started seeing a therapist, a gruff old man who specialized in helping people process decades of repressed guilt. My mother took up gardening, transforming their backyard into a riot of flowers and vegetables that she tended with the same obsessive care she had once devoted to worrying about her children. They came to Sunday dinners at my apartment, and we sat around a table that was too small for all of us and ate food that was never quite as good as we hoped and talked about everything and nothing. It was ordinary. It was mundane. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. Anna and I started a tradition of our own. Once a month, on a Saturday afternoon, we would meet for coffee at a little cafe halfway between our 2 cities. We would sit at the same table, order the same drinks, and talk for hours about our lives and our memories and our dreams for the future. Sometimes the conversations were light, full of laughter and shared jokes. Sometimes they were heavy, dredging up old wounds that still hadn't fully healed. But they were always honest. They were always real. They were always worth having. On the 1-year anniversary of her accident, Anna gave me a gift. It was a leather-bound journal, similar to the one she had given me in her letter, but this one was empty, its pages blank and waiting. "For your story," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You've spent so long being defined by the past. Now it's time to write your own future." I took the journal, feeling its weight in my hands, and I thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The accident, the confession, the long, painful process of rebuilding a family that had been broken for decades. The garage, the business, the new life I was building for myself. The anger that had finally, blessedly, begun to fade. "What are you going to write?" Anna asked, a hint of her old, teasing smile on her face. I opened the journal to the first page, picked up a pen, and wrote a single sentence. Then I turned it around so she could read it. "I loved my sister for the rest of my life." Anna read the words, and her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of joy, of relief, of a gratitude so deep and so profound that it couldn't be expressed in words. She reached across the table and took my hand, and we sat there together in the quiet cafe, 2 siblings who had spent more than 2 decades as enemies and had finally, against all odds, found their way back to each other. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a second chance." "Thank you," I replied, my voice equally quiet, "for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." The cafe hummed with the quiet activity of a Saturday afternoon, people coming and going, conversations rising and falling, the hiss of the espresso machine providing a steady background rhythm. And in the corner by the window, a brother and a sister sat holding hands, their past finally behind them, their future stretching out ahead, bright and full of possibility.